just wait for, I think we'll just wait for, sorry, am I the only one that heard that? Or, I think we'll just wait for the right amount of participants, I guess. Welcome everyone as you're coming in. I figure we wait maybe like 3 or 4 minutes. I think. I might pull up, I've been given some slides, so I might pull those up for the intro. Okay, we're at 40. Okay, I think we've been still at 40 for a while, so maybe I'll just get started. Is everyone cool with that? Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for attending our session and ESA Contemporary Art's very first virtual art conference. Before we get started, we would like to acknowledge that Toronto is in the dish with one spoon territory. The dish with one spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. We further acknowledge that the Toronto District School Board is hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and the Indigenous and the Inuit peoples. As well, we want to give a quick disclaimer that this session will be recorded either for our YouTube channel or for reference for next year's ARTCON. However, the chat and your personal usernames will not be published. As always, we wish to make this a very positive, insightful, and supportive experience. So please refrain from any disrespectful commentary or misconduct. If we see some of any kind, it won't be tolerated and you'll be excused from the session. Okay. All right. I think that's everything for acknowledgements. Welcome again to session 3 of ARTCON, to our audience. We're so happy to have you. Thank you for coming. And to my panelists, I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for joining me. I'm really excited to talk with all of you. I think most of the panel, all of the panelists know my name. And for the people in the audience, I'll just introduce myself and, for the spirit of a discussion and stuff. So my name is Luca Soldovieri. I'm a working artist. I'm a third-year student at OCAD University, and I'm a graduate of ESA Contemporary Art of 2 years, I think. And I was asked by the ARTCON organizers to moderate a conversation around the value of community, both in art and in life, with this group of awesome grads from various years. So I'm hoping that, before we really get into things, each of you can introduce yourselves for our audience, who you are, what you do, where you're based. And yeah, let's just dive right into that. So maybe we can start with Sofia Opel. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. I'm Sophia. I graduated from ESA in 2013. I just finished a Master's of Visual Studies at the University of Toronto. And before that, I did a Bachelor also at OCAD. Yeah, I sort of have an interdisciplinary kind of art practice, also dabbled in some curatorial projects and arts education and administration. And I am based in Toronto right now. Should I pass it off to the next person?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, I'll pass it over to Claire.
Hi, my name's Claire. I'm a 2019 ESA graduate. I'm currently living in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I'm doing a double major at Dalhousie in environment, sustainability, and society and community design. In my program, I study how environments and climate adaptation can help build resilient communities. And I'll pass it off to Parker Lilly. Hi, my name is Parker Lilly, for those of you who don't know me, and I also graduated from ESA 2 years ago. I'm currently studying fine arts, going to my third year studying fine arts at School of the Museum of Fine Arts at Tufts University in Boston. And my current practice is a body of paintings and photography and sort of mixed media work that was all sort of started at ESA, and I just kind of have kept expanding on that. And yeah, the current body of work that I'm doing is consisting of images and paintings of my distorted body, which is heavily influenced by Jungian archetypal images as well as motifs from my personal dreams. So that's some of the stuff I'm exploring right now. And yeah, I will pass it over to Spencer.
Thanks. My name is Spencer. I graduated from ESACA in 2018 and then went on to study at University of the Arts London and completed a foundation diploma in drawing and conceptual practice in 2019. Now I'm studying critical practice and diaspora and transnational studies at the University of Toronto. And I'm a constituency assistant to MPP Butila Carpoche at the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. I'm also a curator and used to direct ESA's project space downtown on Ossington. I'll pass it off to Juliet.
Hello, I'm Juliet. I graduated from ESA in 2020. And I just finished my first and potentially only year of art school at UConn School of Visual Arts in Dawson City. And I also just quit my grocery store job. So now I'm unemployed and my pronouns are she, her. And I will pass it off to Vivian.
Hi, my name's Vivian. I also was in Juliet's class at ESA 2020. I'm going into my second year of study at Tufts University, also with Parker Lilly, and I'm double majoring in art and cognitive science. My current artwork is exploring like the immigrant experience and like my family's history, coming from like China and Vietnam to Toronto. So yeah, I will pass it on to Sadie.
Hi, my name is Sadie Philipson. I was at ESA from 2015 to 2019, so I graduated 2 years ago now. So I'm going into my third year at McGill University, and I'm majoring in gender, sexuality, feminist, and social justice studies. And I also have 2 minors in religious studies and sociology. Yeah. I also make art. Obviously, I went to ESACA, and my art is all about structures and how things connect to each other to create beautiful structures, both physical ones and ones that are made up of people. Yeah, I'm sure I will talk more about it later in this panel.
And do we just have Dexter?
Sorry, Dexter.
It's okay.
Thank you. I'm I'm Dexter. I graduated from ESA. I'm going into my final year at Concordia. I'm doing studio arts and minoring in computer science. And yeah, I practice art. I'm working as an artist assistant right now for 2 artists in Montreal. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I think that's everyone. Now that we're all acquainted. So when I was first asked to talk about like community as a whole, that was really like daunting. Like trying to talk about community period is difficult. Trying to talk about community with everything that's going on in the world and having had little to no in-person contact with all of our respective communities in like over a year, and everybody's emotions around it are heightened. People have spent a lot of time alone. Like that feels even more difficult than it would usually be, obviously. But what I settled on was that the best way for me to do it, usually the best way to do things, would probably be through like stories and experiences. So I sent all of you guys a question a couple of days ago, which is the only question I sent you for today. And I thought it was a good way to get to know all 8 people in the context of sort of our subject for the day or for the evening. And hopefully from that, this will sort of divert into a more fluid conversation. But for our audience, the question was, firstly, can you describe a community that you are or have been a part of that significantly influenced the life you lead or the work you make? And then if you could identify what specifically made this community so influential or valuable to you. Even though we're all brought together by one specific community, obviously, ESA Contemporary Art, I've opened the question up to all examples that feel relevant and right to you. And this will sort of be like a list off question, but then hopefully we'll ask each other questions about it. But we'll just go through everyone. And that'll be the only time we do that, hopefully. So maybe Parker, Lilly, if you could start us off.
Yeah, for sure. So when I first got this question, the first thing that came to mind was a little community, because this last year I've basically just been living in an apartment with 5 other artists in Boston, and they've really been the people I've been around the most. And although it is super small, I would consider it a community, especially in these times when it's really hard to interact with a lot of people. And it's been super valuable for me. And I think definitely living with artists and watching people create within their home as well has really pushed me to view art in a different way. I feel like I've really noticed that the artists that I've been around throughout the years are really able to work within limiting situations and with like a lack of maybe resources or materials, and really just make art that's like intuitive and using with whatever they have. So in my home, I would see the people that I live with repurpose so many different things, whether that's fabrics or old clothes or household objects, or creating a space that feels like a home for us with like very little. And then also just making art out of things that is maybe seems like untraditional. And that was a really amazing experience, because I feel like I'm the kind of artist where I feel like I think too much sometimes. I do a lot of like thinking and preparation for a piece, and then I turn it into photograph, and then I turn that into a painting, and it's a very long process. And I often feel not jealous, but I wish that I could make art more intuitively and like just in the moment. And I think living around that sort of energy that's just sort of like, you don't always need to think so hard, and sometimes you just need to jump into creation, has been super valuable for me, for sure. Yeah, and then also the second part of that is living in a space where you're working with people that have similar interests. And I mean, I always have my art sort of like around me, and I feel like I'm sitting with it all the time, and it sometimes drives me crazy. But this was a different experience because we all had our art sort of around us within the home, and I could watch people sit with my art the way that I have been for years. So I also felt like that was really valuable, because you could really get someone's opinion on your piece, but as they like grow like to see it in a different way. And yeah, so I definitely got a lot of good conversations that came out of that as well. So my home in Boston is what I'm going to say.
Awesome. And maybe we can hear from Juliet next.
Oh my God. Okay. This is a little bit weird, but I just remember when I was in grade 5, me and like 4 of my friends started this like dance group, and we would practice every day at recess, and we got very, very into it. And it just felt like the first time I understood like a group of people coming together to make something that felt like it wasn't just about us. And we like performed it for our class, and we made these like brochures. So there was like all these like different elements that made it so real for us. And like it also, there just wasn't really like a hierarchy. And if there was, it was like understood it was to like get something done for that day. And then we would like switch around the hierarchy, which I think is really key. And yeah, I think that really just like sparked my understanding for what a community could be, especially when it comes to like making things as a group. And then so like I think also when I went to ESACA, I saw a lot, like even unconsciously, I saw a lot of the similarities and was like instantly wanted to become really involved in it. So yes.
Maybe you can pass it off.
Oh yes. Claire. Sorry.
It's okay. I guess I'll talk about my program now, more so the sustainability side of it. But in my program, we talk a lot about how like more so climate disasters and the climate crisis itself would drive a community, because it's often either communities in the same space, or it's a community with like a joint goal or a joint interest. But for me, I'm not in a extreme circumstance, luckily, but being with a lot of people with the same interests, it's given me the opportunity to connect to people and maybe wouldn't have as much. Unfortunately, because of COVID, obviously, I haven't got to know people in my program as much, but there's like this nice understanding within my program, which I'm really grateful for. It's also forced me to look at what I'm studying as like an opportunity to be creative and solve problems. Of course, it's something really serious, but it gives me a way to look at it with a bit more light, so I can focus on doing some good. So yeah, I'm just really grateful for having a shared interest and therefore a shared action. Yeah, I'll pass it on to Sophia.
Yeah, I had trouble kind of settling on one, so I'm going to maybe talk about 2 really briefly. But the first one being Bunker 2, which is, well, formerly was a DIY artist-run space run out of a repurposed Canadian Armed Forces shipping container, which we were renovated from, essentially, last year. And I think this experience working as kind of a co-director, co-curator in this exhibition space was really important in terms of kind of understanding, really understanding community accountability and accountability to one's sort of direct, the people you're working with directly, in a way that I hadn't necessarily before, because I joined this art collective really right out of finishing my undergraduate degree. And I think that accountability isn't necessarily something that you learn in school to the same degree. And then when you're sort of working directly with other artists and programming, it really kind of allows you to think about the stakes of the programming that you're doing and working on in a different way than if you're working under someone as an assistant or as a curatorial assistant, for example. Whereas you're kind of responsible for your own decisions in a way that you're not really in school to the same degree. And then the second example I wanted to bring up was also was my master's cohort, because yeah, I think there's a level of kind of dedication and closeness that I hadn't really experienced before, just because it was such a small and intensive program. I mean, my cohort in studio in my year was only 4 people, so it was very close, and we definitely yeah, learned a lot from each other in that kind of environment where you're all sort of engaging with the same material, and having very close conversations about you know, texts and things that you're reading together and everything. And I'll pass it over to Spencer.
Thanks. I think what I'll talk about a little bit here is my work in politics and in community organizing, political organizing. I work with a member of provincial parliament who represents area in the west end of Toronto, Parkdale High Park. So this is Parkdale, Roncesvalles, Loros Village, The Junction, Swansea, Babby Point. And being able to have these deeper conversations, not only when, you know, going around to people's houses at election time, but also working within the constituency office, which a lot of time ends up being kind of a last resort for people to get help when they've kind of exhausted every other avenue. It's given me a deeper appreciation of just what motivates people, why people care about things, why people are propelled to action. You know, I think in the past year, there's a lot of people who've become a lot more aware of, you know, our history as a country, of, you know, current kind of political situations, but understanding how those dynamics work within this kind of arbitrary but very defined group of what is essentially, you know, 100,000 people living in downtown Toronto. It's deepened my understanding of that piece of, you know, what forms those communities, what forms those bonds, why do people come together to in solidarity with each other. And also, I think one of the pieces of like inequity within communities, it's given me a lot of insight into that. You know, our riding is actually one of the most disparate in terms of wealth and socioeconomic status. And you know, we have folks in the riding who are making upwards of $500,000, while we also have some of the largest population on the poverty line. So understanding, but there is still a very strong sense of community within the riding. So it's you know, not just limited by those factors. So yeah, it's been interesting to understand what motivates people, what brings them together, and how those reasons can actually be very small and very kind of nuanced. I'll pass it over to Dexter.
Thank you, Spencer. Yeah, so this is maybe not the most necessarily impactful community that I've been a part of, but it was really my first time trying to like organize, I guess, art events. I like started an art collective in my first and second year at a university, and yeah, it was like there was quite a bit of people in the collective, like 15 people, and we would have like, we were just kind of trying out a lot of different like organizational methods of doing critiques, and like teaching each other skills and showing resources, and planning shows and stuff. And I think it just really I think like set my expectations for what like kind of like made me really evaluate like what I want out of like organizing shows. And it kind of introduced the idea of art as this kind of way of directing energy towards a certain cause, whether that's, you know, a certain thing that you're raising money for, or just like kind of bringing people together for something. in kind of the variety of I guess functions that art can like be working towards. And so yeah, I think that was just, it kind of fell apart and was like overly ambitious, but yeah, I don't know, it was really fun and like a good like learning experience. Yeah, it was very fast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe could we hear from Vivian?
Yeah, one big motivator for me being an artist and like making the art that I am making right now is like this huge but quiet community of people like my family who've like spent their whole lives running and trying to survive in poverty. And like even now having like immigrated to like a more stable country, they're still hurting and like would rather be quiet and complacent than be vulnerable and unapologetic. And it's like not just my family, but I've kind of grown up around like these people, whether they're like working at the grocery store, like on assembly lines, or like at a factory, like just seeing these people and realizing how like connected we all are through this one experience has kind of like made me realize that I should be like an artist and like do the work that I've been doing. And it's like hard to like witness this, like hard to be a part of this and like witness it every day, but it's something that I would never like change about myself if I could. Like they've taught me like the most beautiful things, and like this community with ESA, like I just would never ever regret it if I could. I'll pass it on to Sadie.
Yeah, okay, so I guess nobody really talked about ESACA, so I'm assuming everyone listening probably knows about ESACA and what it is and what happens there. But if you don't, it's like this high school program and art program, and like everyone in it is basically working towards all the same things, which are like portfolio day, art talks, just creating like a coherent body of work that you feel good about and can talk about. So ESACA, definitely a very, very important one to me. Also, it was like the first time I was a part of such a big community where we were all so on the same page, even though everyone was like at such different stages. It was specifically important and like interesting to be in the upper years of the program and like care so much about the people in the younger years and like want for them what you and your like community of people in your grade are going through now. Yeah, and then also on top of that, the super close friends that I made in that program and I still feel so close to, even though we are like all pretty far apart from each other. We spent so much time together when we were in that program, like all day, every day, basically all of our spares. Like I remember staying after school, like every day, just so that we could all still be together. And I just like loved those human beings so much, and they still do. And we were all just like so on the same page about so many things all at once, like what we wanted and how we felt about like making art and being good people and wanting to like succeed in what the program's definition of that was and our own. And just like wanting to love each other and have a good time also. Yeah, so those are very important communities to me.
Okay, I think is that everyone? Oh my God, that was so much better than than anything. I was like trying to predict what everybody would say, but that was so much better than anything I could have. Thank you guys. I have questions about everything. But maybe we can start with, I'm wondering if you guys can talk about like what it was that you felt that you were doing when you were building community, as in like what to you did it mean to participate? Like what were you giving, what were you taking? What did that look like from your perspective? If anybody wants to jump in, we won't be doing order now.
Well, I know like during portfolio day, for example, you have to basically give as much as you're going to take. You're consistently having to support one another, enable for them to support you and to get a collective goal done. That for me was a big eye opener about how things function on a bigger level for sure. Yeah, but I think just like the basic energy flows of a community became really clear during that whole process and during like any gallery curation process that I've been involved in.
I can just keep it moving. If you guys are feeling a little rusty, I can just keep going.
I think sorry.
Oh, go for
I
it.
just thought of something. I don't know. I think when I started the collective, there was a lot of ideas of kind of the aesthetics of what like an art collective is, and like wanting to have this like cool collective of people doing stuff. And I think that I kind of like struggled trying to think of communities in my life when I was like writing for this, because I think there's like a lot of communities that I kind of realized this during quarantine, that like a lot of communities in my life I kind of I don't really see them as like a community of people in like a really structured way. Like it's kind of, I don't know, they're just people who are in my life every day, and it's hard to like see them as like a labeled community, I guess. And so just really what I've realized during quarantine is just kind of validating the community that you have, and realizing that like there's like an art community and like a normal community in your life are like very much the same thing. And yeah, I don't know, that I think that like there is a certain ideas of like art communities that have to be a certain thing and have a certain look or like a definition for them. And I think that it can be beneficial to kind of realize that anyone in your life who cares about you and is like you're talking to about ideas can be a really supportive art community. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think something that or certainly me and my colleagues have sort of talked a lot about in regards to Bunker 2 is just sort of you know, what our shared beliefs are, you know, what kind of voices we want to prioritize, and how can like what are we able to do for the Toronto community that other galleries or DIY organizations aren't able to do? Like what does our specific set of skills mean we can offer to the art community in terms of, you know, because you know, with a lot of DIY galleries and art collectives, often offering artist fees isn't always a possibility when you're running a space solely out of pocket. And so it becomes important to think about sort of different economies of you know, skill sharing and trading and support that don't necessarily rely on financial means, but maybe can offer other kinds of communal care.
Just going off what Sophia's saying, I was thinking about this while you were bringing that up, and I think one thing I really appreciate about the art communities that I've been a part of is the ability to skill share, as Sophia said, and also realize where you can help someone out, and that can be reciprocated in ways that aren't always like financial, and that can also be just like in presence, in time, but also I think it's really great when we're talking about like interdisciplinary art communities where everyone has a different skill set and everyone is able to offer something. And I've noticed, especially in my my university classes, and the people that I've met there, that if I have an idea for a large project that feels unattainable, if I speak to the people around me and ask for what I need, there's normally someone that is able to offer me time to help me with that. And in exchange, I can help them with some aspect of their work, and just sort of like leaning on each other, because I mean, we all are young artists. And I think that that's really valuable, that we can like offer our time, our knowledge, even if that might not seem like a lot. I think that is really helpful. So yeah.
I've heard a lot, like when you guys were telling your stories, and also now a lot of you have touched on learning so far, and I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts about this. If what might the value be of like learning the same things with a group of people and moving through that process together rather than separately? Like, what is the value as a group and for you as an individual? If anybody has thoughts about that.
I think like everybody's brains process things completely differently. So when you're learning from each other and just like something in general, you're simultaneously picking up on like everyone else's thought process about that thing. Like it's not so singular. Like doing things as an individual will always only get you so far because you're not entertaining those other perspectives and sort of having that like forcibly at you. Like you're sort of like unconsciously like drinking everyone else's ideas. It just creates a space where I think learning becomes more interesting, more articulate, more complex, and like the best learning is complex, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so crucial to hearing other people's perspectives and thoughts on the same, a shared resource or material can really lead you to sort of realize your own unconscious biases and understandings of the world in a way that you probably wouldn't if you weren't learning alongside other people. And I think that that's really, really valuable.
My next question was going to be, what is made like possible in a community that isn't as an individual, but you guys mostly answered that. If anybody else has any thoughts about that, or we can just skip right over it and keep going. Like something interesting that I think a couple of you touched on, Sophia and Vivian, a little bit, that I hadn't even thought of when I was thinking about different kinds of communities, was people who are brought together by a shared experience. Even if they've never met or connected in person, this sort of like sort of web of people that Vivian was talking about, like what is made possible by a common experience.
I think having multiple different types of knowledge and different experiences and coming at something as a collective through having different experiences, everyone's gonna take a different approach and have a different reason why they may be in that space, and that's so important. And I think it's also really important to protect certain people through that, like through hearing as many ideas as possible, you're gonna protect as many people as possible and get the most holistic end product.
Yeah, just adding on to that, I also I think that it's really amazing when people have shared experiences but also have different interests within that, and like have different like ways that they actually want to work with those shared experiences. And I think that's something that is really made so much stronger by working with people and working with groups and collectives, and especially as artists. Like not everyone wants to approach the same topic in completely the same way. Everyone will come at it with their own ideas, but also it's really cool when you're working with like collective art groups and everyone sort of wants to take on a different part of that. And there's only so much, as Juliet said, there's only so much you can do as an individual. And I think like not only mentally and conceptually does it complicate it, but also like physically, I think you can go a lot farther if you lean on people for support.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
I also just want to say as people kept saying shared experiences and how you become a part of a community just by having a shared experience with other people. I think that specifically is so interesting and beautiful because you come to learn and love people that you don't really even know anything about just because you share one specific thing. Yeah, and it's a very odd but like heartwarming experience to feel like you love people that you don't even like really know. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add on to like just like living at home, like we don't talk that much. We don't say I love you, but like you just feel like the silence between us holds something much deeper. Like that silence itself can be love. And just like being at ESA, also like just being together in the same space with like my peers, like I could also grow, and like growing isn't something that I found to be like individual. Like as I was growing, everyone else was growing around with me. And even though I can't bring that into conversation with like my parents or something, like I could feel like they're picking up on that also. And just because we have that connection, like it's just always being resonated with every, like in the space that we like exist together in, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Vivian, I have a question for you that I wrote down while you were talking that you're free to answer or not, but I feel like a lot of other things that like other communities that we've heard about, like I feel like intent is really important. It's a lot of conscious action, choosing to be a part of something, like exercising intent all the time in the community and how you participate. But I think that family is a really interesting version of community because it's kind of the inverse. You sort of are brought together with these people first and you figure it out along the way. And I'm wondering if, I don't know if you have an answer to this, but how you exercise intent in that situation, or if you do.
Yeah, like I always think about this like pretty much every day. Like I never really chose to be born, and like my parents never chose to be born either. And like it's kind of like lottery, like we just are together and you just wake up and like you realize that every day. And honestly, like I feel like that, like just being a family, just existing, we could love each other, if that makes sense. Like we don't need to like say it, or like we don't have to like hug each other or anything. Like just, I guess existence is the intent, if that makes sense. Like just, yeah, like to love each other, we just need to exist.
That was perfect. Thank you, Vivian. Okay, we're already like 40 minutes in and I feel like it hasn't even happened yet. Like I feel like not like wow. I'm wondering if maybe we should probably, part of the title is the value of community and art specifically. So maybe we can move into that a little more, like specifically. I'm actually wondering, for those of you who didn't talk about, like I know Juliet, like you didn't talk about a community, or like Claire, like you didn't talk about a community specifically relating to the arts, like a collective. But how might communities that don't specifically relate to the arts like still support your art making, or do they?
I think art communities are built off of not art communities. Like I think something that's really important, I'm just going to keep saying communities, but yeah. Something that's really important for communities is actually having distance from that community as well sometimes, and like engaging with and like using the things you learned within the community in different aspects of your life. And like, I think communities are more of this, like kind of as Dexter was saying earlier, like this like nomadic thing where you're like going around and like interacting with all these different ones versus like it being this thing. So yeah, I think because you bring your whole life experience into what you make, whether you like it or not, they inherently do. Yeah.
Yeah, you just answered like 3 of my next questions, but that's okay. And then for those of us who talked about art communities, I feel at least that for me, like art making is a very private process. It's very personal. You spend a lot of time alone. So what's it like to let people in on it? Like what's it like to let people in on such a personal thing, I guess? to anybody? Yeah, you go for it.
I just raised my hand. That was so weird. Okay. Yeah, this is something that I've been thinking about a lot because I think for me personally, I kept my art pretty private for a while. Like physically, people could see it, but I didn't really talk about it a lot. And definitely in the last 6 months, that has changed, especially because I've actually been really need to lean on my community in order to create my art. And I was working with my own body and specifically like my own body nude, and I needed people to take photos of me, which is obviously super intimate, but also then like it started the conversation of like, what am I creating and why am I creating it? And that whole process of sort of like letting the people in that live around me into my art and talking about it has been such a good process for me. I feel like it's really helped me contextualize my art more and sort of understand it on a deeper level. Again, like, I don't know if you guys feel this, but sometimes I think that like everything that goes on in my head is like real, but until I speak it out, it's like it like changes when I speak it out loud. I don't know. Yeah. So I feel like for a while my art was sort of just existing within my head, and then when I was able to speak it out loud, I feel like I learned so much more about it, and then also connecting it to others' experiences and also just watching other people respond to it. And I think that's like a great thing about being in art school, but also just being surrounded by artists, is looking at each other's work and responding to it authentically, and you can learn like a lot from how other people respond to your art. But it's definitely a hard process, and I don't know if anyone else has felt that like it's something that you sort of keep really private, and it definitely takes a lot to make your art like more public. And definitely even like the process of me being the subject of my work and like having to do this shoot with someone else was something that I really had to like, it took a lot of, I don't know, courage in a way, because I feel like it's not something I am ever comfortable doing.
For sure. I'm wondering, Sophia, you mentioned earlier you've done a BFA now and MFA now. Let me know if I'm wrong, but you've taught a little bit at U of T, is that right? And I also read that you founded like a monthly crit night at Brandscape. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the value of like, a little bit about what Parker Lilly said, but the value of articulating what you're working on, like your process and like processing as a group.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think in many ways that's actually one of the most exciting things about being involved in the arts, is being able to have these really in-depth discussions with your peers and the people that you admire. Yeah, I think in so many ways, you know, the arts is a very communal thing, and that you come to opportunities and events through knowing and working with people. Yeah, sorry, what was the question, just about sort of the articulation of? Yeah,
like sharing your work when it's not finished, articulating what you're trying to do to a group, how that contributes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really for me, those have been some of the most kind of valuable experiences. I think it's also really useful just to have to talk through your thought process and what you're working on and thinking about. And I think it can be really useful in sort of distinguishing between what you're saying about your work and what the work is actually doing for someone who's spending time with the work and engaging with the work. Because I think those are two very different things. And I think it's easy to say what the work is doing in an artist statement, and that can often is sort of taken as by many people as what the work is doing or is about. But I think the sort of affective experience of the work can sometimes be very different, or even undermine what you say the work is doing in an artist statement or something. So having people seeing the work and discussing it, I think is really, really invaluable.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And like kind of the opposite of that is like kind of the opposite of letting people in on your process. Like you and Spencer actually have done quite a bit of work in like the gallery and curatorial space, so working with finished work. And I'm wondering if you guys could talk about that a little bit, like curation and exhibition as a tool for like building communities and working with artists and like connecting artists to one another. And if you have images of shows that you have curated that you would like to share to use to talk about that, no pressure, but if either of you are up for talking about that.
Yeah, I can touch on that a little bit. I think there's a kind of unique thing that I was able to witness through the project space that ESA had, where many of these shows were people's first shows. They were, the first kind of opportunity for people to take their work into the public and to present it to, oftentimes even their family members. So within that context, the kind of birth of the artwork or the birth of the like kind of the work, it became a very intimate experience. You looked at how people, viewed those non-art communities onto their artworks. I think, throughout the creation of a lot of people's work, it's created within this, this artistic or, art frame of mind. And then thinking about a show, you're thinking, okay, so how is someone going to perceive this without that frame of mind, without that context, bringing it into a different context? And, just witnessing a lot of the artists that I worked with go through that experience, I think that's kind of one of those convergences of where those non-art communities meet those art communities, where, you're a little bit of a reality check, a little bit also of, have I actually made something here that is relevant and meaningful to people? Going back a little bit as well to, my work in politics, I think that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed, one of the biggest disconnects between, art making, art processes, and a lot of the communities that those projects are supposed to serve or to help or to meet. And a lot of the way in which we facilitate art is completely disconnected from the way in which communities work, the way in which people kind of gather and communicate, and often is very kind of very cold. And I think that's the other piece here is just that again, that confluence between those non-art worlds and those art worlds, or those art communities and those non-art communities. It's that disconnect between, does this make sense over here in the art community? It doesn't make sense though in a non-art community. It doesn't make sense within, even if you're trying to speak to a specific experience or a specific kind of feeling. It doesn't resonate because we're using rhetorical devices and visual language that is just not connected to those communities.
For sure, absolutely. I think, Spencer, while you were talking, it made me, like, some of the things you said reminded me a little bit of Juliet, actually. So I might ask Juliet a question next, if that's okay. You involve people in your work in a very different way, in that specifically in your photo video work, I've seen you direct shoots with 6 or 7 people actually in them, and then even more people helping you. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what it's like to let people in, like actually physically, and work with people in that way, and the impact that has on your work. And if you want to show some of that work, I wouldn't be doing my part for you guys if I didn't let you plug your work, and we'd love to hear about it. So
Yeah, I think like my work is like nothing without other people. Like I'm so reliant on other people, and I'm so grateful that other people are like willing to do it a lot of the time. I think something that has been really special is kind of like going in with a general idea of what's going to happen, but then just like really letting everyone involved like give ideas and like work them out, because like everything in the process, like they're actually doing the things, so they know how it feels and they know how to like interact with it. And so often their instincts make something like better than what I can think of. And I just, yeah, like I working with other people within like a singular artwork, like kind of making a little community. And I really do. I mean, it's so weird to like the kind of individualistic state that I think a lot of art continues to take, or like specifically for me, like even it's weird to like have my like specifically my name attached to something, because I'm often like, but like so many people's energy went into making this, like yeah. It's just it, I think everything gets more interesting, and because everyone brings their own perception of what the piece is to it while you're making it, you get this like complexity that I don't even really understand a lot of times. And like, yeah, I can show, I don't really know what to show.
You don't want to, there's
Okay.
no, you don't have to. It's just an option.
Yeah. Could I just say one more thing? I just like specifically a memory from ESA is just like being in a room and just like asking people if they're okay with it, and just like literally pulling them into it, sort of. And like, and also like becoming friends with people through making things, like that being sort of like the beginning of a relationship, like that. Those are some, like, that's just really beautiful to me. Okay, I'm done, sorry.
No, please. Vivian, you were in the same year as Juliet, and I had the pleasure of overlapping a little bit with each of you. And in some ways you're doing something, or at least when I got to be around you, you were doing something similar to Juliet, just in your own way, just a little bit differently. You make work around like distance and closeness and connection between people. And I'm wondering if you can show some of the work that you made at ESA and the stuff that came after that, and you can talk a little bit about it, and maybe what it was like making that work within the ESA-CA community at the time, if the two were related, if they influenced one another, if you're up for it.
Yeah, like same thing with like Juliet about like the community. Like I don't feel, like it feels so weird just to see like only my name on like an artwork, when it's like everyone like helping and everyone's energy and everyone's like influence. But yeah, I could show something.
Please.
Yeah. Can everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is like a video series that I'm currently working on, and it's like taking a bunch of clips from the public domain of like lonely people walking in the background and putting it together on a single path. So it looks like one person's like walking that path, when it's like a bunch of scattered moments and people and like spaces coming together. And like this is like kind of how I felt like when I was at ESA, just like being with people, not even like talking, just being together with people and having like us being like connected through that. Like it's just, I feel like it kind of speaks for itself. And yeah, this is like totally how I felt, just being in a community, just living in the world with other people and just not knowing this person in front of you, but like still being connected to them. Okay, I
So
think,
beautiful, Vivian.
thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I was actually, I think you have some common ground with Claire here, actually. I was gonna ask Claire about this later, but this is actually, I didn't know this work, and it's very related to something I was gonna ask Claire about. So I'm wondering, Claire also, while at ESA, started making work around people in relation to one another and public spaces. And now, as you said, you're studying a double major of community design, environmental sustainability and society. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a wordy name. It's basically just sustainability and community design.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about, like, if you're comfortable, show like the work that you made then and what it was and how it relates to what you're studying now? And everyone will see why I think why it reminded me of Vivian's work, I think, hopefully.
Okay, I'm gonna attempt the screen share. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Right. Can people see this? Yeah, okay. So in my years at ESA, I quickly became more interested in the problem solving aspects of art creation, maybe more than the actual part of art, but I was creating these photos which I would document how people move within a space. So I take multiple photos of one space, and then together they'd show what the living environment looked like. So this is one example. I found it interesting listening to, oh, sorry, Juliet, because she was talking about how
Claire,
yeah.
I think we're only able to see half of the image because just
Sorry.
because of the way the screen share is operating. If you drag it directly over the yeah, if you drag it directly over the folder,
right.
I think you'll be able to see it better. The other way.
Okay.
Other way.
This way?
Yeah,
Good.
like that.
Okay, sorry. It's like flipped me for some reason. Okay, I can see better. Okay. But all the people who were involved in my work didn't know that they were involved in it. So I would just capture these moving paths and they would create an image afterwards. And it got me really interested in how a space can dictate people, and otherwise how people can dictate a space and how they grow. So that is how I moved into community design at Dalhousie, and I was interested in architecture when I first came to the program because I thought that would be a really important hands-on way of seeing that. But I quickly learned that sustainability is such a extreme sense of allowing something to work and allowing a group of people to come together to make something work as best as possible. Yeah, hopefully I kind of explained that right. Sorry, I was a bit distracted by my poor image sharing. Yeah. And then after doing these images, I started making some sculptures which forced people to move through a space. So that was some experimental work. And then, sorry.
It's okay.
Hopefully I've stopped sharing.
Yes, you have.
Yep. Okay, great.
This might be a bit of a this might be a bit of an iffy segue, but we haven't heard much from Dexter and Parker Lilly yet. So I have a question for you to combine. I was going to say, speaking of people moving through spaces, but that might be too forced. I was gonna ask. You've both moved through at least one or two different arts communities now, and I was wondering if you think that your work changed as you moved through different communities, and either of you are free to show your work as an example or not, but that's a question I thought would be interesting to ask people. Like Dexter, you moved to Montreal, Parker Lilly moved to Boston. Just curious about that.
Yeah, I can start. So, I mean, it's interesting because although I feel like my work has gone through a lot of transformation, I've actually realized that in the past 6 months, I feel like I've sort of returned to some things that I was looking at, like even physically and like creating in my last year at ESA. And I can quickly share my screen, but one sec, sorry. Okay. Okay, so can you guys see this? Oh wait, this is not the slide I want to
Oh,
do.
yes.
You can see it?
Hmm.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this is like my portfolio day setup. Luca is there, nice and big. And yeah, I was mainly making like acrylic paintings, and then I also did some experimental photography work and an installation, and stuff like that. And although I feel like the things that I was trying to explore very much like don't really resonate with me right now, I think that that change really came about from like the new space that I moved into in Boston, and also uh, as a part of my degree, I have to take a lot of academic classes as well at this university. And although I normally am one of those people that just sort of like wants to create art all the time, it has really pushed me to look at art. And okay, I guess it's pushed me to bring other ideas and ways of thinking into my art. So I think my work is much more conceptual now, and also just resonates in a different way. Again, this is some ESA work that just feels very old to me now. And this is sort of like the photography work that I was working on at ESA. And it's interesting because, yeah, I've sort of come back to this idea of like distorted versions of self in my latest series, which I'll just show a little bit of. These are two recent oil paintings, smaller oil paintings that I was working with, and they're distorted versions of myself in a mirror, and also just like some creations from my mind and my imagination. And then this is a larger oil painting that I was recently working on. Again, the distortion has remained. Yeah, and some photography work. Again, black and white, which is something that I really enjoyed in high school. And I really just didn't think that I would see similarities, but I do recently. And then this is just like a little bit of the stuff I've been working on. Again, some images from recent pieces. Okay. But yeah, I feel that I definitely think that as I moved from ESA and this sort of space that was like almost like an explosion, like I could create anything and it was so exciting. And I wanted to create very large pieces and stuff. And then I moved to another space that, although it was like really exciting, it was a little bit more limiting. Like, of course, I didn't have the space and the resources as much. And it really forced me to sort of like find other ways of creating, and definitely drop more into other interests and reading and like looking at yeah, different ways of gaining knowledge to apply to my art. So I think that definitely like university is important with that, and I actually feel like the class that I've taken have been valuable. But yeah, I feel like I've kind of gotten off track. I'm not really sure
Oh,
what
it's
the
okay.
okay, cool. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
Dexter, did you have anything you wanted to contribute or talk about on that subject?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, a lot changes just based off of like the resources that are available to me, and I don't know if I should share work. I'll like just share my Instagram feed. If that'll be chaotic. Yeah, that'll be good. So basically, yeah, at ESA I was doing a lot of oil painting and yeah, two-dimensional work, and I think going to university and having a metal shop and a wood shop was really influential, and then the ceramic studio, and it's kind of like, I think what I've been doing, I'm still in school, so I'm still like discovering what I want to do, and just trying to maximize like the resources that are around me. I was thinking of a joke of like the Montreal construction really influenced me here when I first moved. But yeah, just yeah, I think, yeah, just going to ceramic work and then video work, and going back to painting. It's also interesting for me to look back at this as like a timeline, because I made this body of work here kind of during quarantine, and I was inside like a room in my apartment, and it was very small, so everything kind of became like, like really intimate size wise, and so that's interesting to see. In terms of yeah, like cities, I don't know exactly what effect that's had on me, but definitely everything I make in art, I don't know, you're kind of like interacting with a cultural language, and that's changed by everyone who's around you and everyone that you're looking at on a day-to-day basis. So I can definitely see like Montreal influences that have affected me, but I guess I think a lot about just this kind of larger language that I'm interacting with, and I kind of see art making sometimes as like communication that's kind of delayed, where you're thinking of something to say for a long time and then you say it, and it's kind of like to a broader, like Vivian was kind of talking about this like community that's connected through cultural pieces maybe, or like experiences. So yeah, that's, I don't know, I think the biggest thing moving to Montreal though is just remembering to like stay in contact with friends, and like have certain people that you like make sure that you maintain connections with, because that's really important. Yeah.
That actually, I mean, this can be a question for Dexter and for everybody, but I'm wondering like how your participation in ESACA, or if it affected the way you approach communities in the future, like what influence that had. Did it have an influence? I know for me, it certainly did.
I can try that one. I think the biggest thing that was a takeaway from ESICA for me was that, I've come to approach communities afterwards as trying to make everyone else as successful as possible within the communities that I'm, coming into, right? I think that was one of the big strengths of ESACA, was that it was a, lift all of us up attitude. And so just that, ability to see potential and to see, room for growth in people, I think that was one of the biggest things. And I think that's, ultimately what does make strong communities. Touching on a question we got from Nick Morgan,
Thank you.
It's all good. He just asked, what does that work look like to strengthen those communities, to keep those communities together? And I think that kind of aspiration of, thinking about how, if we're approaching these communities as something that we can always make better, that something that we see there's, potential to grow and to kind of move forward together. I think that's ultimately the biggest thing I got out of ESACA, but also, how I look at communities and how I think we can build more strong communities.
That's beautiful. That might, yeah, no, Parker, Lilly, please.
Okay, I was just gonna jump in there. And I agree with everything that Spencer said. And I think that definitely this lack of necessarily like being in competition with each other is really important, I think, in the art world, especially because everyone has such a different like place in it. And I think that everyone sort of sees themselves in a different place, is looking towards different things, and also their physical and, you know, conceptual art is completely different. It looks like something completely individual. So I feel like that's something that I definitely have taken away. And then also, I think one other thing is that I notice often, especially being in a new space and being in a new school, people will shy away from showing work that is not completely finished or that feels unresolved, or feel uncomfortable with like sharing work that isn't necessarily put together completely. And I think something that I've really taken away from this high school art program is that we were all in high school. We were all, you know, 14 to 18 years old, trying to figure out our work. And also it was a consistent everyday thing. So I feel like it got me really comfortable with seeing people and really meeting people where they're at, and also seeing work in process and seeing that also as valuable. Not every work has to be like a finished masterpiece. I think the process is also super valuable. So that is definitely something that I take away, and something that I try to bring to like my friendships with artists and peers now, for sure.
Mhm.
If I can just say also, Parker, Lilly, what you just said got me thinking about like how hard it can be to be like vulnerable with people about like unfinished work, or like super like personal things that your work is about, or whatever it is. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, okay. So Luca's question from before was like basically like, what did the ESA community, like what did you learn from it that you like take to communities now, I guess. And for me, it's like when critique season would like roll around and everyone was like super scared to like get up in front of the class and like be one of the first people to share and get really real. Whoever did it, it like paid off so entirely, and like so much more than you even thought it would. And like the more you put yourself out there and the more vulnerable you made yourself, like the more beautiful and productive it ended up being. So that I definitely take with me, especially because now I know like when I enter new spaces and new communities or new friend groups, like it's gonna take courage at the beginning to like be the vulnerable one, or like say the thing that's like really scary, to make the experience worthwhile for everybody after that.
Sadie, this might be a good time. I'm wondering, now that we're sort of on the ESA track, I'm wondering, while you were at ESA, you sort of made work very much about like communities and what was going on there and what was going on in the other communities in your life. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what that meant to you. If you would like to show work, you're free to, or you can just talk about it.
I only have a few images. I'll share them quickly. Yeah, okay. This is recent. This is from ESA. And then these are two installations I did for Portfolio Day. This one and this one. Yeah, well, I've been making like, my work, I guess, is like, I call it like structural work. And I was making that from the time I was in grade 9. I was like building things that looked like rooms and houses. And like, that was always just like the interest for me in terms of like making things. And I didn't know what that meant. And there was a lot of pressure about like explaining that and having that like be important, especially as the program went on. And then I kind of just like abandoned. I was like, whatever, it doesn't need to be about something, I think, as a lot of people do at a certain point. And then I was spending a lot of time just like being in the community, like hanging out with my friends, like really just like fully genuinely like being like in love with the people around me. And so I started to think of this like pretty big community of people who I loved very deeply as like a structure of its own. and then I was like, oh, like structure. And then I was like thinking about all of these communities in my life, like my family, my different friend groups, and I saw them all as like their own structures. And then I just kind of connected the dots from there between my life and my work. And then my work just became something I could use to talk about all of the beautiful groups of people that I had in my life and that I was a part of. Yeah, and then I guess because the work was then about these very, very important groups of people in my life, the work became more important. And then like the communities in my life also became more important because that was what my work was about. Yeah, so they both made each other way more important as soon as they got paired up in my brain. Yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Perfect. I mean, that really beautifully summarizes. I feel like you talked about ESA specifically, but for me personally, that can be said about a bunch of the way you talked about it can be said about a bunch of the different arts and non-arts communities in my life. So that was kind of like the perfect summary. But it leads me nicely to my sort of final question, which Parker or Lilly like inadvertently answered a little bit, but I'm wondering if everyone can kind of talk about this. So this is gonna be the final thing I ask you before, if there's anything left in the Q&A, which I have not been checking. Thank you, Spencer. My final question is, what have you learned about yourselves as individuals from being a part of the communities we talked about today? So not just ESA, but all the ones that were sort of mentioned in the beginning. And we can just kind of do that popcorn style if anybody wants to go first.
I think just that like you have to be willing to let go of your ego to actually grow. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Sadie,
Yeah.
Sadie, you go.
Well, mine's just very similar to Juliet's. I'm gonna say like I learned how terrified I am of like telling the whole and like completely honest truths, especially in front of a group of people that I've never been vulnerable with before, and it's like your first time. And I also have learned how worth it is to do it, and how much more I believe in myself when I see the people that I'm very close to and that are around me do the things that I'm terrified of doing. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, similarly to you guys, I definitely feel that. And also I feel like I've learned from the communities that I've been in that I can't do everything alone. And it's like almost a disservice to myself and others to try to do everything on my own. Because I think that we are stronger collectively, and everyone has something to share and bring to each other. And that also, this has kind of been brought up, but it's really hard to be honest about the way that we feel, the work that we make. And intimacy is really hard. But I think that it's really important to push through that, because that's really the only way that we're going to allow other people to also have that as well. So again, by allowing ourselves to, I guess, like be honest with the people around us, it's also serving the community and, you know, the greater good of the people around us, because it's giving them permission to do the same. So it's hard, but it's good.
Yeah, I think in the communities that I've been in, it's that sense of solidarity that's been the most important thing. So, you know, fostering that kind of sense of responsibility to one another, and using that as a catalyst to, work on yourself, but then also work in community, care for each other. I think that's ultimately one of the most important things that I've learned.
I think for me, the first thing that comes to mind is I've learned how little I know and how much I have yet to learn. And that's a very exciting opportunity to be reminded of that from your communities of people you really admire and respect.
I think I've learned that in order to see something you want to be accomplished, you have to hold yourself accountable and give that same energy. So like, I'm sorry to talk about the pandemic right now, but like, I feel like that's a perfect example. Like, in order for something to get done, every single person has to commit and put the same thing into it. And then with with the gallery show, in order to get it done, every single person has to put in the same energy, and it's really rewarding and a good motivator for myself, of course.
I think the biggest thing I've learned over the past few years is like it's impossible to like feel connected to a community if you're not vulnerable and like giving yourself fully to the community. Not fully, but like putting some effort in. And you can't. There's no other way of getting around it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm reminded every day that like love isn't something you find, but like you realize that's always been there. Like I feel like a couple of years ago before I came to ESA, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Like I probably still don't, but now I feel like there's like a direction that I want to dedicate myself to like others and like making art and giving. And I just feel like I'll never be my best self if the world's not its best self. And that sounds so morbid, but like it's something that I really want to do. And I never thought I would have wanted to take that on before. So yeah.
Okay. I don't really know how to like end this. That was the perfect thing. I guess just thank you. Like thank you for talking with me today. I think you guys are all so smart. Like I know you all in some capacity, but it's been really exciting to hear from people that I know a little bit less. Like Sophia and Dexter, it's really nice to sort of actually get to interact with you and hear from you. Yeah, thank you to our audience. Thank you for coming and listening. I don't think we have any other things in the Q&A. So I might, you guys should plug your websites and your Instagrams in the chat if you would like, if you want to share those. And then I have a little set of outro slides that was given to me, so I might get right on those. Okay, so thank you so much to, ESA Contemporary Art for having me, for having all of us. Thank you to Matthew Very specifically, as always. Check out ESA Contemporary Art on Instagram and on YouTube. There's more sessions of ARTCON that you can register for on the link below. Also, the end of year sale is going on right now. Tons of students put a lot of work into it. The links for that are there too. If you would like to donate, the link is at the bottom of the webpage. Yeah, thank you so much for having us. And we look forward to seeing you at ARTCON 2022. And I think that's everything.